You tell him, Ashton.
Hmm?
Tell him what we're doing here, Ashton.
Why?
We're going to make a YouTube video. Gonna replace the rings on your 92 Honda XR80R. Derek's over here doing it for his first time, and I get to sit on my lap and be the instructor. Alright, we got the bike stripped down, ready to start on the motor.
What?
Stand beside your bike.
Go stand beside your bike in the garbage pile. There you go. That's right. There you go, beside the garbage pile.
You done?
Alright, so we got a 92 XR80R here. Rings were shot. We're going to go ahead and replace them. This is the neighbor kid's bike. It was smoking more than a 2-stroke, and this is a 4, so it's not a good thing. Anyways, getting the engine off, no big deal. A bunch of bolts are on the brackets. It's one of these split frame jobbies. I thought you could do this on the engine. I thought there might be enough clearance, or on the frame, sorry. I thought there might be enough clearance, but I couldn't get the top off of the studs. I guess if you wanted to pull the studs, you could go ahead, but for the amount of work, it's, you know, half dozen bolts. There they are right there. Just pull the damn thing off and deal with it on a bench where you're comfortable anyways. So anyways, first couple of bolts here, pull the cover off. I already loosened them up. There's a big rubber seal here, and I'll yank that off and show you the valve system. Alright, so your valve system, you got your rocker arm and guide here. It's held on with 4 nuts, 4 flat washers, make sure you don't lose the flats. And it has dowels to guide it, so it's a bit of a tight fit when you get it in here. You take the 4 nuts off and just tap it with old trusty rubber mallet here, and just kind of wiggle it like this and apply a little upwards pressure while you tap the sides here, and it'll come off. And it slides up. Be careful of those dowels, sometimes they'll fall out. You can see here you got your oiling holes and whatnot, okay, passages so that they lubricate the rocker arms. You know which way is forward when you look at it from above. You'll see that this side is basically flush and this side has an indent. Okay, the indent side is at the back. What I like to do is put all my parts in one common area, so the head here, the cover, all my upper engine parts will just sit in there, all my nuts and whatnot. I already got the cam gear off. It was just pissing me off, so it's 2 little 10mm nut bolts here. You have to rotate the engine to get at both of them, because the other nut would be down here, and if you go flush, you can't get at either of them. You can kind of get them with a wrench, but they're goofy, so it's just easier to rotate the engine, take that one off, rotate it, take that one off. Camshaft just pops out once you get the valve rockers off and the gear. There's a little bit of scoring there, but it's nothing, you can't even hardly feel it, so that's fine for a backyard dirt bike. Okay, the gear, you can wrap the chain with a string just so it's easier to fish it back up through the cylinder and the head later on. I just use a piece of wire is all I do and pull the. Alright, I just wanted to show you the wire there. So I got the gear out, just wrap a little piece of wire or string, doesn't matter. I like wire because it's rigid, and when it comes time to feed it back up through the cylinder, you just give her a yank and there it is. About a foot, maybe 18 inches is all you need. And I mean, you can let it go now, it doesn't matter, as long as you'll be able to get it up later. Okay, the next thing we're going to pull out is the long bolt here, and this bolt goes quite a ways down into the block, so it goes through the head and through the cylinder. We're going to yank out the cam chain tensioner. This is your fine adjustment here. I already loosened it, and on the side here you loosen a lock nut and spin out the screw and that'll come out. This one actually holds, you can see it, the tensioner down in here. And once you get that out, there's a spring down inside that sits on a piece of the casting over here. You can't really see it when it's assembled, but I'll try to show you a little better when it comes time to assemble. Alright, so there's your bottom tensioner. I left the lock nut on it. You notice it's got a little rubber donut seal. If I can get that to focus. The seal, if you're leaking oil out of the back, you don't want to replace that seal. I don't have one. I might have some in my bin here. Anyways, I'll look at that later. Your little lock for the upper one. Pull it right off. Your bolt, okay, I wasn't kidding when I said it's a nice big long one. Okay, goes clear down into the block. For the top tensioner, okay, you see it's a cam, that's how it works, and it goes through the spring part of the tensioner, and when you turn it, it just rotates, and the back part will turn. Again, a rubber seal on it. Obviously there's a bit of oil that'll come out if that's gone, but this wasn't leaking oil, so it should be fine. This is a little difficult to get out. It doesn't screw into anything per se. That's why you had that lock collar to hold it. What I did was put a screwdriver on it, wiggle it a bunch of times while pushing down on this piece, just to mess with the tension, and it'll kind of come out slowly. And you can grab onto the end with a pair of pliers and wiggle it and twist it, and it'll come right out. Alright, so there's your tensioner out. Head's off. Once you get the head off, this slides out really easy. There's that spring I was telling you about. It's got a little curve on it, and that goes right into that. So assembled, it would go in so like so, and you just make sure you put that spring on there as you're putting it in. It's a little tricky, but not too bad. Big old fat thumb in the way here. There you go. So you see how it would go. I guess the good thing about burning as much oil as you do gas, the piston's pretty much self-cleaning. There's the other side of the tensioner. This goes on the forward side. Okay, cylinder's off. It wasn't too bad. The dowels popped off while I was hitting it. They just slide right back in. You can see the cylinder is not scored too badly. I already went at it with a hone just to clean it up a bit. No real damage there. I'm gonna check it with a dial gauge later. I got most of the rings off and just mucking around here with the oil spring part. They didn't look broken or anything like that. I broke the second ring getting it off. They're pretty brittle. I'm replacing them, so it's not the end of the world. There's your new one gonna go on. Or sorry, this isn't the old one, that's the new one. That's part of your oil rings, and those are what were gone. This thing was burning a ton of oil. Get a piece of there. There. Okay, so here's your rest of your rings. That's the one I broke. The oil ones are really super thin, very flimsy little things. They were just so boring, the oil was just flying right past it. So when you get them off, or when you take them off, just use your fingertips and you'll kind of grab the ends and rotate one up like that and just slowly work it around. If you try to bend it too much, especially the tops, they're hard steel, they'll snap, they're really brittle. So just take your time and go carefully and they'll come right off. And I'll start cleaning this up and put the new ones on. Okay, I just wanted to show you this here. This is what they talk about with ring gap. This is the new oil scraper ring. The bottom top doesn't matter, they're the same. And when I place it in the cylinder, and again this is a worn out cylinder, the diameter is actually a little larger on this than it would be if this was a new cylinder. And you'll see that they overlap right there. And clearly you don't want them to overlap, so what you're going to have to do is pull that out and file it down just a little bit at a time, until you have a proper gap. Now you check it with a feeler gauge like so, and when it can slide in there, that's when you know you have the right ring gap. We're going to grind that down with a little die grinder and just take a bit off, put it back in, check it, a bit more, put it off, check it. What you're looking for is about 35 to 40 thousandths of an inch gap. Different engines vary, and that's just particular for this one. Okay, I checked my measurements there, and I said 40,000 before. It's actually 16,000. I had to convert it over to imperial. So you use your trusty little feeler gauge here. There's 16,000 or 17,000s, and after grinding, you'll see that it just fits in there. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. And I don't like to check it right at the very top because it's not going to be perfect. And you can see it just fits. So we're going to go ahead and do the other side, or sorry, the other scraper ring, and start putting rings on. The same process has to be done for every ring. And the top one and the bottom one are actually a little bit different. The second ring is a little bit more gap than the top. Again, consult your manual or manufacturer of whoever made your rings, just so you know what they're supposed to be at. Alright, oil rings are on. The gaps. Now the gaps are what's important, especially when the oil rings. So your bottom gap on this one is over here. So at about the 1 o'clock. Your expander, which is that coily one, the gap is over here. And then your top gap is right here, so at about 11 o'clock. And the reason they do that is so when the oil has to go through this gap, all the way over to the other spot to go up the other gap. If you have all them in line, the oil just shoots right up there and there's no resistance. Basically, the oil doesn't have time to go up here, over here, up here, and then in. With the engine moving too fast, the oil can't get up there. Alright, so that's why you got to gap them out. Now the top compression rings are going to have gaps as well. When I put them on, I'll give you a quick picture so you can see what's going on. Alright, so compression rings are on. The top ring gap is at the facing rear, and the front ring gap, second ring gap is facing the front. The thing about these rings on this particular engine is they're slightly different thickness, I found. So it's the top one will go into the second groove, but you'll notice it's a lot tighter when you try the other ring. So just make sure you're putting the right rings in the right spots. Alright, get that out of the way. Cylinders on, lots of oil. Literally soak the piston down before you even start to put it on. Coat the inside of the cylinder with oil. It'll make it slide in a lot nicer. Make sure your dowels are all in place. This is where the wire comes in handy. I just fed the wire up the cylinder, and there's my chain already halfway done. The bottom of the cylinder is tapered outwards, so the bottom actually makes it easy kind of to put the rings on. Just as you're doing it, use your fingertips and kind of push in on the ring. Make sure the gaps are going, and just wiggle the cylinder pressure, and it'll go down. You don't need to hit it. If you're hitting it, then you probably need to stop and check what's going on. The last little bit, once the cylinder hits the dowels, I use the old rubber mallet there again and just give it a few light taps on the outside. And you don't want to hit this gasket surface, particularly here around the cylinder. If that starts leaking, you're going to lose a ton of compression. So certainly don't damage that, and be careful hitting the fins. Some of these older engines, you can snap them right off. All right, this spot here where the seam is, and this spot here where the seam is, they're reinforced all the way down, so you can kind of tap that and that, and that's basically where I hit it. And again, just very, very light. It's not even all the way down now. Once you torque everything down, put the bolts in, she'll pop into place, no problem. But you want to be close. That way you know you're not, you didn't do anything wrong. That seam should be buttoned up pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and install the head and then the chain tensioner parts, and we'll get this show on the road. Okay, as promised, the tensioner. It's easier to put on with the head off. It really makes no difference. You can do it later, but it's easier, I find, to line up that spring. And there's that spot. Focus. There you go. There's that spot in the casting to put it in. And it's just going to sit in here. There's no slots or anything on the inside that you have to worry about. So that side sits there. Now the other side, all right, this one actually has one of the ears that's kind of snapped off a bit, but it'll work still. And there's a wide end and a narrow end. You'll see where the chain has been rubbing over the ears. That goes to the top. And on this side, there is actually some slots you have to line up. Now when you look down in there, you'll see right here and here is where the T part here will go. And down in the bottom, you can't really see it, but somebody buy me a better camera. Okay, there's a similar notch out in the bottom where that top part will sit. I'll try and get a little smaller light here and we'll do it. But anyways, you basically put it in and just wiggle it around and there it goes. You just got to make sure that bottom's in. And that's all there is to the tensioner at this stage. Okay, head gasket's on. All the tensioner stuff is loosely in place. The dowels, okay, sometimes they'll stay in the head. For me, one stayed in the head, one stayed in the cylinder. I took that out, and I like to have them both here on one spot so you can see them and make sure they're lined up. Cylinder head gasket, okay, it will only go on one way, and that's why the dowels are important. The holes obviously are larger diameter. It looks like you can go either way, but you can't. So there is a top and there is a bottom on that gasket. For me on this one, there's some extra holes, which I'm assuming a generic head gasket for a wider range of engines. Those obviously aren't going to be required. They don't do anything. They're just going to sit there. I wouldn't cut them off or do anything. They're not in the way. They don't interfere with anything. I already checked the head. Pretty clean. I went at it with a wire wheel and cleaned out some of the carbon. The exhaust had a bit on it, but this one, like, it was so wet from burning oil the way it was that it literally was washing itself as it went. So surprisingly cleaner than I thought it was going to be. This thing would foul up the spark plug in under an hour's worth of driving, to the point you had to stop and clean it or change it. Okay, head slid right on, no problem. It's not quite all the way down, but I just give it a little pop and it'll go. Again, that's why the wire come in handy. You just feed it up through this large gap. You see you want to check your tensioners, make sure everything's where it's still supposed to be. That one should wiggle a bit, and that one is the chain. And that one is there, but it's a little low, so I just got to move it up. It's no biggie. It's just the only thing holding it right now is that spring, so it'll move pretty easily and line itself up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get all my cam back on, my rockers, and then I'll start mucking with the chain and the timing here. Okay, valves are, rocker arms are all tightened down. I did a quick check on the valve lush while I was here, just to make sure it was still okay. Since I didn't pull valves or do anything with the valves, it'll be pretty close, but didn't need any real adjustment. The tensioner is now in. You can see right there. The screw just goes in the hole. You got to wiggle it a bit to line it up, and obviously the screwdriver in the slot. And when you turn it, you look down inside, you'll see what happens. And that moves that arm, and that arm will put pressure on the chain to get rid of any slack. Okay. As well, that's your fine adjustment. The coarse adjustment's down here, and that's a screw that pushes on that steel rod that you saw. All right, so you want to adjust this one first, then this one when the engine's running, and you'll just listen for the engine. You'll hear when it's starting to get slack. You can actually hear the chain clanking around in there. And what you're doing is you're basically getting rid of this tension, this looseness that you see. All right. The chain, you don't want it to do a whole lot of that. Okay, so all that tension is to get rid of that slack that's in there. There you go, 92 Honda XR80, new rings. Oil rings were real bad on the old one. It was smoking so bad. You plugged the spark plug in about a day, maybe half that, a couple hours of driving anyways. You can see her there idling away. It's at a high idle now because it's doing a break-in period. No smoke at all coming out. Just that carb up. And there she is, all done, ready to